Welcome to the Art of Action Figures. I'm excited to be bringing you an episode that I've been wanting to do for quite some time, and it's episode 10, so I figured let's break it out for special base 10 milestones, and that topic is the evolution of action figure technology. And to do so, I've brought out Goku, 3 different ones, from my favorite figure line, SH Figuarts Dragon Ball. What I'm going to do is run through Goku's moveset from the Dragon Ball FighterZ video game with each of the 3 body types, and as I do that, I'll point out what the differences are, and most importantly, how it affects posability and aesthetics, because I think to really get a sense for what the difference is, at least for me, it helps to see what the figure can do. Because a lot of times they can still do the poses you want, even if they don't have all the joints you might think they need to do certain poses, and vice versa. Sometimes the joints are in the right place, but they don't work. But before we get going, I want to announce that I am cooking up something special for episode 12, and so I want to show a few of the figures that are going to be involved in making that episode, and see if anyone can piece together what I might have in store by leaving a comment and letting me know. I think this will be a fun game, and I won't say yes or no whether you're right. I'll just tell you if you're hot or cold, hot being closer to the correct and cold being not so close. And yeah, I'm gonna probably do a tease in this video and then one in the next one, and we'll see if anybody figures it out. All right, so the first figure is Hasbro Marvel Legends comic book Doctor Strange. And the second figure that I'm going to be teasing is the Hasbro Power Rangers Lightning Collection Ninja Yellow Ranger. And then the third figure for today is Hasbro Marvel Legends Speedball. All right, so if you've got an idea what I might be doing with those 3 figures in episode 12, leave a comment and let me know. On the left here is a stock SH Figuarts base form Goku. The middle is a kit bash of 2 SH Figuarts Goku figures. He has the head from a Saiyan raised on Earth and the body from Full Power Super Saiyan Goku. I'll explain why in a minute. And then on the right we have something that is not Figuarts at all, but is a third-party imitation unlicensed figure, kit bash also. It is the Kong Studios KO24, I believe, the Super Saiyan 3 3.0 Goku body with the Demoniacal Fit Unexpected Adventure GT Goku head. It's fit to the body with a custom neck peg that I printed out. And the reason that I'm using a third party for 3.0 is Figuarts hasn't made a 3.0 Goku. It looks like Demoniacal Fit might even beat them to it. I hope not, and I can't wait to see what they'll do. I really hope they don't do the Beast Gohan shirt. In the meantime, I have this figure as a stand-in, which is kind of modeled on, or at least heavily inspired by SH Figuarts' own 3.0 Ultimate Gohan superhero, who also featured in the Beast Gohan video. So go check that out, and you'll see this is a really similar setup, joint-wise and proportions-wise and sculpt-wise and every-wise. So let's caveat just the fact that these heads are not necessarily meant for these bodies. These are, like I said, adapted with a custom neck joint here. This one, the 2.0 and 1.0, actually has the same size neck peg for every Goku body on 1.0 or 2.0 build. So the heads do swap easily. We'll talk a little bit about something funny going on with this head on this body. And let's see. If you come from other action figure lines, something you might get confused by is when we say 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, are we talking about the figure technology generation, or are we talking about how many versions of the character have been made? So I'll give you an example. The Boy from the Future Trunks figure is on a 3.0 style body, and the previous version was on kind of a 1.0 style body. I'd probably call it a 1.5 because it's got some new stuff like a torso cut and kneecaps. So while the Boy from the Future Trunks is the second version of Future Trunks in the blue jacket, people come in and are like, oh yeah, that's Trunks 2.0. That's the second version of Trunks. Well, you're going to get confused if you're talking about it like that, because in figure arts collecting, people will use that kind of numbering for the body type rather than the iterations of the character. The first 1.0 Goku figure was actually his Super Saiyan form from the manga, and I don't know if that figure was actually Figure Arts number 1 or if Piccolo was. Let me know if you were collecting back then which one came out first. I see conflicting information wherever I look, so it would make sense for it to be Goku, just as an outsider, but, you know, respect if they made Piccolo first also. Piccolo's awesome. But yeah, this body dates back to, I think, 2010. It's the first Figure Arts Dragon Ball body setup. And we'll call this the 1.0 body. Really quickly, we'll talk about the 1.0 figure aesthetic. If you want to spot the differences, the best way is to first look at the waist joint. The 1.0 figures will all have just a single cut where the thigh connects to the waist, and then inside there is a drop-down ball peg, so it allows both rotation this way, that way, and then there's an inner socket inside the thigh, and the thigh can actually rotate around that slightly, so you get a little bit of thigh swivel, but not a complete 360 thigh swivel like they'd add later. So that's the biggest difference. I personally don't really like drop-down hips. I think they make the figures a little too unstable more often than not, and don't look very good when they're utilized. I think really it sometimes gets employed as a crutch for when the figure can't get the range that you would expect on a hip joint. So I'm not a big fan. The one time where it is okay is if the character needs to kick higher than 90 degrees. Sometimes the cuts of the waist just make that impossible, so you need a drop down to give you a little extra leverage, and this figure doesn't get much more than 90, but it does get a little bit more, and then it also enables him to kick back. But then look at it from this side, and that looks pretty weird. So yeah, this is the style of joint that Mafex is still using. They've, as far as I know, just consistently used that joint. Also seen some use in Hasbro figures. Mostly Lightning Collection and G.I. Joe, I think. Not so much Star Wars or Marvel. But yeah, I honestly don't care. I don't want it, really. Like, make sure they get the range that they should just by the cut, the shape of the cut, and the placement of the ball peg. And it's fine. Some other things about the 1.0 aesthetic, they have this very characteristic knee taper that looks a little odd. It's just the way they were always sculpted at the start. The body overall does have a much more seamless look if you are into that, but you also get some strange shoulder sculpt here where his shoulder almost looks like a shoulder pad. And let's see, the arm anatomy isn't going to change too much between 1.0 and 2.0, if at all, just the shoulders. Then the torso does not have a mid-torso cut or joint, and so all of your torso articulation comes out of a ball peg going up into the center from the waist, and it actually is on this like extending joint, which you can kind of see poking under the belt there, how that's situated in there. And it does give him range, and the belt hides the gap usually, so it's actually pretty decent compared to what would come next. They haven't managed to squeak in as much range as I would like on their torso articulation yet. It definitely looks weird if you just extend it and leave him, but it is meant to be extended and then posed at a steeper angle. And if you try to pose it without extending it, it tends to just reach a point where it will just start to pull out anyways. So last difference that we'll talk about 1.0s have is this shoulder socket design, where I'll go ahead and remove these. These are just shoulder pads that finish off the shirt, and they peg into the back of the arm on these little ball pegs. They're a bit fussy to pose, in all honesty, and you can see I've started to get some blue paint rubbing off on the shoulders, and you can see the post for this ball peg goes deep into the chest, like almost to here. And so it does actually give you like a pretty cool, not necessarily a butterfly joint, but something that functions like a butterfly joint, because it gives you some pivot around the chest. And I'll show you that. They should have just cut the torso here at this fold, and then he would have been able to move, even just with the same exact joint, he'd be able to bring his shoulder back a little further, but you can see it runs into that shirt before it actually hits the edge of the socket. Because if you have the shoulder pad sleeve piece on, it's got plenty of material there to actually hide that cut. So I don't know. I still think it's a decent shoulder design, and I didn't point out, but there's like a loose, just like unattached cylinder disc kind of in there that probably should be orange. But it does hide some of the gap, but not too much. It really doesn't do a whole lot except make that noise. So yeah, it's there. I think the most similar shoulders that I've seen to this setup are McFarlane. Some of their like DC Multiverse and other lines, they have a similar extended ball peg deep shoulder socket. It works okay. It's not the best. I think Mafex style is still the best, and we'll get to that in a bit. Alright, now taking a look at our 2.0 Goku. This is the full power Super Saiyan Goku body with the Saiyan raised on Earth base form Goku head. I'll do a quick rundown of the differences, changes that they made compared to the 1.0 figure. Starting from the top, the neck is pretty much exactly the same setup and actually the same size ball joint. So the 1.0 and 2.0 Goku heads are typically compatible. They continue to utilize these sleeve pieces that peg into the back of the shoulder. The paint rub issue seems to have been solved. I haven't seen that on any of my 2.0 Goku figures. They've updated the shoulder joint. Now, where the 1.0 Goku had a deep ball peg, this figure has a shallow ball peg that just goes into this inner socket, and then that inner socket is also on a hinge, but it's only front facing, so it can hinge out that way, and it looks pretty strange because they made it his flesh tone, but you can use the shoulder pad to hide it. The downside of this design is it doesn't hinge backwards at all. So you get kind of half of a good butterfly joint, and it's honestly not the best going forward, at least on Goku here. Later 2.0 figures like Piccolo, they would really just unlock that hinge and it can go like a ridiculous amount forward. Let's see. Other differences. So they've added a mid-torso cut. This was done on some of the 1.0 figures, even like Krillin and the first Future Trunks. Maybe Android 17. I don't know. Several of them after Goku would have a similar mid-torso cut, but this one's actually got a ball and socket joint that goes into the top of the abdomen, but then there's also a hinge that again goes forward only, and with that you can actually get some additional ab crunch. So here's without the hinge, and then here's with the hinge. And at the waist there's another ball socket to give a little bit more movement, but still not as much as I'd like to see for these figures. There is a modification you can do to some of these 2.0 figures. They have like a little tab on the hinge that limits the range, and I think they do that because it can prevent this from becoming separated back here. If you do that modification, you get a big gap here, and when you repose the figure, it's likely to kind of scratch up the lower back piece. So I haven't done that mod personally, just for that reason. I don't think it looks very good, and I don't want to damage the figure. But definitely would love some more torso articulation on the Figuarts figures. The last major difference is the hip joints. You can see we've gone from one cut to 1, 2, 3 cuts. I guess they're not all technically cuts, but there is a cut for a thigh swivel. And then inside the hip, you have kind of a swivel peg that gets you that movement. And then there's also a hinge that gets you this movement, and it goes out about that much. Some people like this design because it lets you kick the leg back, although it doesn't really go back straight, so it doesn't really seem like a benefit to me, and then you get this kind of weird thing going on. This piece is meant to kind of become their butt cheek when they're sitting, which is kind of awkward. I've never really liked this design, and if you go outside of Dragon Ball Figuarts and look at what people say in, say, like the Marvel community, I know people who just will not buy Marvel Figuarts entirely because of this segmented techie crotch look, and for some reason Marvel is one line where they continue to do this even though they've updated the design since. So I personally don't really like this design. It blocks the range of motion too much. Like you can see this doesn't let him kick all the way to the side, and it's actually because it's running into the cap here. And remember the 1.0 shoulder sockets that had a nice audio feature? Yeah, it's just like this really hard, kind of chintzy feeling plastic that doesn't really do justice to the rest of the figure, I think. So I'm glad that they've moved on from this design. Finally, they've made a couple small improvements, like they added this kneecap sculpt, so there's no longer a giant exposed hinge in there. It's still a double jointed knee. They've scooped out a lot of the back of the pants to make it work, and it doesn't look good from the back. And it actually looks kind of thin from the side too, which was one of the first things I noticed with these figures, was just how thin the legs look from the side, because you see how wide they are here. It's a little bit odd. But it does get good enough range past 90 degrees. Obviously, I'd love to see almost 180 degrees with a double hinge. The arms, they've improved the shoulder sculpt, so it looks much more organic now. It doesn't have that weird overhang. The arm sculpt, I think, is pretty much the same. There's no more paint shading on the skin, which can look a little bit flat. I think the skin tone on this 2.0 Goku is probably a little too yellow. I remember Vegeta's skin tone is more like this, whereas Goku's is more pink. So, let's see. And then you notice just like a lot of hot spots on the figure, and that's because they didn't really bother to tone down the glossiness of the finish, except on like the lower pants and maybe the upper torso. So the finish is a little inconsistent on this particular one. The Saiyan Raised on Earth body is a bit better. Now going over the 3.0 Goku, this again is the Kong Studios Super Saiyan 3 3.0 figure with the head from Demoniacal Fit GT Goku. But I will pull out a Figuarts 3.0 Gohan here just to show these are really similar in their setup. You can see the arm sculpt, pretty much the same. The legs and the hip joints. Once again, pretty much the same from the front and the back. The torso, the cut goes up a little bit higher. Well, maybe, I don't know. The folds and the cut are a little bit different. Obviously, Goku's got the blue undershirt. And then one other difference is, because this is technically a 2.0 Goku head, the shouting face doesn't have two-tone paint like Figuarts has started to do with their 3.0 figures, and I don't actually know if some of the newer like 2.0 remastered figures like Vegeta Awakening Warrior, Awakening Blood, what's the name of that figure? Something like that. Compare that to the Demoniacal Fit face here. You can see it just has that one shade of pink, which looks pretty bright compared to Gohan, who has the two shades of dark red for the tongue and the inner mouth. But other than that, and the like plastics, You can tell the third party definitely doesn't have as high quality of plastic. It just has a bit more of a shine and hardness to it than the Gohan here. But it's a decent stand-in for me for now. So we'll go ahead and pose him in his Goku poses. But before we do that, let's talk about what's new on the 3.0 body. Pretty much the same areas that they touched between 1.0 and 2.0 have been updated on 3.0. But starting at the neck, there's actually a different style neck joint. It's now just like a ball socket. And this is a custom 3D printed neck peg that works okay. It's not perfect. It is a little bit limited in the range just because of how low the head sits on the neck, but that is kind of consistent with the 3.0 figure arts. They just have gone for more of that late Dragon Ball Z era look where everybody was super swole, and it does get some pretty good range on that just ball peg. And then in the neck, there's only a hinge now. It's no longer another ball joint that gives you tilt, and I wish they would have just left that alone. I don't know why they switched it to a hinge. It doesn't really help with looking up and down, especially up is still way too limited. Like, that's pretty much it. Gohan's a little bit better. Let me bring him out, but it's still nowhere near what it needs to be for characters who do quite a lot of flying around. You can see what the inner workings look like. There's no more hinge. It's just a barbell joint. Let's see, other differences now. The shoulders, remember the 2.0 hinge with the sleeve that pegs into the back of the arm. That is gone. The sleeve is now this kind of cylinder shaped piece and Mafex style socket. All right. And in the torso, there's just a ball peg connecting the lower torso to the waist, and then another one between the upper torso and the lower. And you get decent ab crunch, but still not as much as I think you need on Dragon Ball figures. Some tilt going back. Let's see. If you want to see a full breakdown of the articulation on this figure, check out the Super Saiyan 3 Goku review that I did a while back. And then the hips, 2 cuts on the 3.0, one for the thigh swivel, and then the inside inner mechanism here is pretty much the same as the 2.0. The crotch shape is different though. It has more of a sharp angle, and then there's no longer that floating cap. You still get the swivel that goes forward and not too much backwards, and we'll say why in a minute. But then there's the hinge that gets the kick to the side. And then at the back, they've sculpted like a butt plate onto the back of the waist. I personally think it looks better than the 1.0 and 2.0. And it does mean that you can't kick his legs straight back. Without having to rotate the waist quite so much. And you can see there's room on the Kong figure, but I don't know if it's just the way that the, maybe it will go, actually. Let's see. That works okay. I don't know. That's good enough for me. It might not be for you, but the reason they need the butt plate now is without it, and without the hip cap, you would see the top of the thigh, which is just a a hole that allows for the hinge to work. And the last improvement that they've made is the knees. They've really improved on the kneecap design from the 2.0. It's a bit fuller now. The range is better on the knees themselves, and the pants have some depth compared to the 2.0, and they're now sculpted like pants on the hinges at the back.